Hi, I'm QVC. In this particular video, I'm going to do something that's different. I'm not going to build a model kit like I normally would do, but I'm going to make this video as a dedication to a man that I've never met. This is the story. In my area, there's a nearby military museum, and in my military museum nearby, they would allow all types of donations, not just monetary. So if you have military vehicles, for example, or if you had parts for a military vehicle, they would accept it. And so there was a family in my area that had personal belongings to one of the family members, and they wanted to put it into the museum. Now, the museum is not specializing in human history, just military vehicles. And so they told the family that they weren't interested in having that in the collection. So what they did tell them was that they would sell it at a yard sale, and the proceeds would go to the museum. And so the family said that was fine. They didn't want to have this, these possessions from their family member. So here how I got involved. There was an open house recently at the museum, and I went to their yard sale. The yard sale had many old uniforms and all types of gadgets that were selling off that they didn't want to have in the museum. And so I discovered this particular box right here. This box was marked as $15 for the entire box, and in the contents of this box was mostly books and other materials that was written in Polish. At the time when I was looking inside this box, I was fascinated. I didn't know how to read Polish, but I thought it would be fun just to buy the box, try to read what was in the contents of these books, and read the notes, the handwritten notes that was in this box as well. And I just thought that it was maybe like a manual on how to fix a Polish tank, or a manual on how to fix a Polish airplane, something like that. So what I discovered was that this box is nothing like that at all. This box is family heirloom from a man who actually was so proud of his military service that he kept the most important parts of his life during the Second World War in this particular box. Let me tell you more about that. Alright, so here is the man kept a picture of an advertisement of a duck and also the water buffalo. That was pretty interesting. Maybe he was in one of those as he was going through the war. And here is the textbooks right here, and another one right over here. It's falling apart, and there's more textbooks over here. There's also Polish, the symbol Poland right here. He was very proud of being Polish, and he actually framed this Polish symbol here. Okay, so right over here that I'm pointing at right here is a number of health certificates that's written in English. This is something that really piqued my interest here, because this is not written in Polish, of course, but if you read this very carefully, it says that this man here had passed medical exams, and he was so proud of that that he actually framed it and put it in his house and hung it up on the wall. Then there are some religious materials here, like this one here. A lot of religious materials with some postcards. One over here. And it gets more interesting. Here is a Polish community center, and if you look very carefully, it says right over here, it says "Free Poland from Communism." So this gives a lot of clues about who this guy was. Okay, so what I have here in my hand is this notebook from the Second World War. This notebook was written mostly in Polish, and what is the most interesting thing about this particular notebook that he kept in his pocket was that it clearly shows that he couldn't speak English too well at all. What he'd done was when he had to communicate, he didn't know how to speak English too well, but he actually knew how to write in English. And so he actually was writing things for people to read because he had a hard time getting things done. So he wrote on this one, it says, quote, "Copies must be made up for 4 o'clock in the afternoon tomorrow, i.e. December 29th, 1943. And he also wrote in English to someone to read, would you exchange use Palestine banknote £10 into Syrian banknotes?" So this actually really opens up a lot about who this person is, because he was Polish. It's quite obvious that he went to the Middle East and he had to communicate to someone in English, and so he wrote things in English for the person to read and understand what he wanted. Okay, so what I have right here in my hand is another certificate that's not been framed for a medical certificate saying that he actually passed under the test. And this one has it's written in English, and this says the Polish Resettlement Corps. And so I looked up the Polish Resettlement Corps. It's actually it's British. So after the war, the British wanted to help the Polish by having them become British citizens, and what they've done was they actually created a corps to have this person learn skills, so once they resettle in the United Kingdom, they have a job and actually be productive citizens. And this one says that he is a chemical by profession. So those textbooks that I was showing must have been involved with this Polish resettlement corps to have them learn skills to become a productive citizen in the UK. So over here is the man's identity card. It does have a picture of him, and this is written, and I'm a manager here, well, here it's English, but I'm assuming these part was actually in Polish and another language. So I do have a picture of this man. Here is a medal and the accompanying, I guess, certificate that goes with this medal. And if you read carefully in the center, it says Monte Cassino, 1944. So this man fought in the famous Battle of Monte Cassino in Italy in 1944. So this really hits home about how important he thought about himself during the war. The last piece is this right here. This is a badge, and this particular badge was worn by British officers on their hats. And this badge says that this man, this Polish man, was a chaplain. He was doing God's work during World War II. So all these objects put together really just talks about who this guy is. His entire story during the Second World War. So what happened was, for this man, he was in Poland. He was a fairly young man and most likely he was very religious, possibly working. He was maybe was a priest before the war, or maybe he was aspiring to become a priest. And so when the war broke out, when Hitler invaded Poland, he had a choice. Either he could flee to the Soviet Union or flee to the West and go to the UK. He chose to go to the West, go to the UK. So when he was in Britain, he decided that he wanted to volunteer into the army. And so by doing that, they had him become an officer and become a chaplain. Now, he had to go to Palestine, today's Israel, to go to training, because the records, historical records show that Polish fighters were sent over to Palestine for training. That's the reason why there's notes written in English saying that the exchange was banknotes, from about exchanging banknotes in Palestine. So he became an officer. He fought through the great battles of Monte Cassino in Italy, and then when the war was over, sometime in the mid to late 1940s, he had a choice, another choice. Either he could go back to Poland, which is now communism, part of the Soviet Union, or he could stay where he was at in Britain. And so he chose to stay in Britain. He got himself involved in the Polish Resettlement Corps, learned a trade to become a chemist, and then I suspect that he decided to go to London and stay there, because it was said in my research that most of them were actually resettled in London. So he stayed in London, being a proud British citizen, and then eventually he immigrated to the United States here, where I'm at in California. With all this material here, I really want to make a dedication to this man. So watch me build something to really dedicate his contribution towards the war effort. I bought this display case for the chaplain, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to decorate it by putting the picture right here, the badge right here, his notebook, and his 2 medals. Alright, so everything's all set up. I arranged all the items here to look the way I like it. So now I'm going to go ahead and close the lid, lock it, and now it's going to be ready to be hung on the wall. I just installed the cabinet and his framed symbol of Poland here in the hobby room, and so I think this is going to be a fitting place for it to be. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's really mind-boggling to me about why a family would just simply, in my point of view, throw away a man's past like this, because this is quite obvious that this is very important to him. He kept all of these materials about the war because he thought it was important for him, but obviously for them it was not important. I want to be benign about this. I want to think that the families thought that it was just simply junk, that about him serving in the war, getting these medals was something that wasn't really big about him, that they just simply want to get rid of it and just go on with their lives. That's on the benign side. But on the other hand, I think what's more realistic is that he has done something horrible after the war. It was so bad that that they just didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore, including all of these materials. Now, if that is the case, which I think is probably more true, it's you can never erase the past. The past is the past, and even though what he had done after the war has really made the family so, just didn't want to have him anymore, doesn't mean that it'll erase the past. So, I think, in my opinion, that they should have kept it because future generations would want to know more about him. I'm sure that his grandchildren, great great grandchildren, great 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 grandchildren in the future would love to have these things for him, despite what he has done after the war. I'm QDC, and thanks for watching. Goodbye now.